Most dads who want to transform their bodies fall into one of two traps. They either do too much, following plans designed for 20-year-olds, which leads to burnout and, in the long run, wrecked joints. Or they follow plans that do not deliver much bang for their buck, and eventually, after putting in their precious time and not seeing results, they eventually lose interest. That being said, let's see how one goes avoiding these traps while making consistent progress and getting stronger from week to week in order to build a superhero physique. By the way, in episode 3, we covered all the essential exercises you want to include in your weekly routine. So if you haven't watched that yet, make sure you start there. That being said, today I'll share with you all the basic principles you need to keep in mind as you program these exercises across your week. And to help you understand how to put all these principles into practice, I'll be also sharing with you my personal current workout split as an example. Still, keep in mind that this is just one format that works, but in the end, whether you prefer training 3, 4, 5, or 6 times a week, the best split for you will always be the one that makes the most practical sense for your schedule. As we said, ending up with injury is common amongst dads that go after big fitness goals, one of the reasons behind that being not optimizing recovery. But if you follow the 5 strategies that I'll be sharing with you today, when designing your training plan, you can minimize this to a great extent, if not completely. So let's quickly see what are these in a nutshell, and next I'll share with you examples of how I go along with implementing them into my split. Strategy number 1 is having enough upper and lower body rest days, specifically to ensure sufficient recovery of your upper and lower body's neuromuscular system and joints, especially when you're training hard, which is a prerequisite for building a superhero physique. It is always a good idea to have at least 3 days when upper and lower body are not directly stimulated. Strategy number 2 is heavy and light work. I like to incorporate this especially when it comes to more dynamic kind of training, things such as plyometrics or my favorite, hill sprints, since splitting these into one heavy and one light day works best for recovery and long-term progress. Strategy number 3 is rep range cycling, specifically rotating between light, meaning 15 to 20 reps, moderate, meaning 10 to 14 reps, and heavy, meaning something between 5 and 9 reps, not only boosts muscle growth by targeting all hypertrophy mechanisms, but it also balances fatigue between your muscular and neuronal systems while lowering again injury risk, especially when incorporated in the way that I'll be sharing with you next. Strategy number 4 is rotating compound movement patterns. Specifically, you want to avoid repeating the exact same movement pattern 2 days in a row. And next, you don't want to be training each of these compound movements more than twice a week, especially if you're putting into practice everything we covered in episode 2 when it comes to progressive overload and intensity. This way, you'll stay fresher when you return to each of these movement patterns, and you'll avoid repetitive local stress, which usually leads to inflammation hotspots. Finally, strategy number 5 is protective variety when it comes to joints that receive high impact, and especially joints that you're more injury prone to, areas such as your elbows, shoulders, wrists, knees, and so forth. You want to vary things such as grips and exercise execution in order to minimize, again, repetitive local stress across the week. This way, by incorporating strategy number 4 and 5, you move through a broader surface area when it comes to your joints, which keeps them well lubricated and resilient. By the way, if you're done avoiding the mirror and taking off your shirt at the beach or the pool, if you don't only want to look good, but also feel good, perform better at work, and handle life stress with more resilience, all that without the hustle of getting to the gym and bending your life to somebody else's schedule, then look no further, since this is what we do, having coached over 100 dads the last 2 years. So if you want the structure, clarity, and accountability that a coach brings to the table, and you're ready to dial in your training but also your nutrition, then make sure you fill in the form below. There's a link in the description of this video and the top pinned comment. Right after you do so, we'll schedule a free consultation call, see if we're a good fit, and get to work. So once again, fill in the form. There's a link below, and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. All right, so now that we covered all 5 strategies, let's have a deeper look at how all this applies when it comes to practice. Starting with an overview of my training week, you can see here strategy number 1 put into practice, since Mondays, Thursdays, and Sundays are full rest days for my upper body, and Tuesday, Friday, and Sunday are full rest days for my lower body. Next, let's have a look at Mondays and Wednesdays workouts, where you can, for starters, see strategy number 2 put into practice here, heavy and light training. Specifically on Monday, which is my heavy lower body day, I start with wall sits in order to pre-fatigue my legs and specifically quads. Next, I move into heavy uphill sprints by adding some friction through a tire that is dragged behind me, a deadly combo that amplifies the hypertrophic effect of hill sprints by increasing power output demands and making your legs work harder in order to generate force under extra load and fatigue. Since this setup is more demanding for the lower body and overall recovery, Wednesday session is a lighter version of this, where I simply focus on sprint mechanics and speed, since there are no pre-fatigue exercises or extra load. Moving to Tuesday and Friday, here let's have a look at repetitions in order to explain the rep range cycling strategy. When it comes to my vertical pulls here, I like to start with a high rep set of bodyweight pull-ups, working within that 15 to 20 rep range. This is followed by slightly weighted pull-ups, aiming at reaching technical failure within that moderate 10 to 14 rep range. And lastly, I finish with a heavy set of pull-ups using a weight that allows me to reach failure anywhere between 5 and 9 reps. The same is done with dips, plus keep in mind that if your setup allows it, you can also superset these exercises in order to keep your workout short. Next, since I only do 2 sets for rows and push-ups, I like to focus on a moderate rep range here for both of these. And lastly, I finish with 2 supersets of ring pike skull crushers and ring rollouts, again focusing on a moderate rep range. The great thing of A, sequencing your exercises this way, and B, sequencing your sets rep ranges this way, is that besides optimizing hypertrophy, you also train a lot safer, since load is more smoothly and gradually increased. Moving on to Wednesday and Saturday, in order to see an example of strategy number 4 put into practice. As you can see here, I have strategically placed exercises that involve hip hinging and vertical pushing, which are movement patterns that are not repeated the previous day, and therefore, even though, for example, I still train upper body the previous day and this day, nothing is done in excess. Lastly, when it comes to strategy number 5, protective variety, if you look across my week, you can spot great variations that I've chosen to include in order to avoid, again, joint overuse and inflammation hotspots. For starters, let's say I'm doing straight bar pull-ups on Tuesday, then I'll try to do pull-ups on rings on Friday, or simply switch to chin-ups depending on my workout spot. Although I love handstand push-ups as a vertical press movement because these can be hard on your wrists and shoulders, I will alternate these with one arm shoulder presses as you saw. This way you also add some beneficial variety in terms of hypertrophy since you're hitting your delts from slightly different angles. When it comes to Romanian deadlifts, I like alternating a straight and mixed grip, using the latter usually for that last heavy set. Plus, I'm also considering using straps on my RDLs on Saturday when my grip might be overall tired from the whole week. This way, I can take some load off my grip and elbows, allowing me to therefore focus more on hip hinge mechanics rather than forearm fatigue. Overall, these are just a few adjustments, and depending on how you feel on a weekly basis, you can make even more little tweaks here and there, as long as you basically have a serious reason behind this and you're not adding variety simply for the sake of variety. That was all for today, and until next time, keep on training.